What's up, guys? Welcome to KP Community episode number 8. Yeah, getting there. Garrett, co-host Garrett Phelps in the building. Garrett, what's going on? Not much. Man of many words. Tonight we got a lot going on. We've got Inside the Metrics, Under the Hood. We got AMA. We got a couple questions. Great questions there. We got the wrap. Tonight, Mike Sonne dropping in on an Inside the Metrics. Pretty stoked about it. And also Mike Sonne dropping down to Tampa here first week of December to do a live recording with us, hopefully. So keep an eye out on that one as well. Tonight, we got a lot going on, man. This past week, leading up to tonight, this past week, number one, appreciate everybody subscribing and engaging. My personal Instagram, my personal Twitter, been a little fiery lately, so is what it is. But appreciate all the individuals that are commenting, dropping new content. I've been trying to follow up with that personally on the channel as well, the YouTube channel, answering questions and kind of illustrating some of the things that we do. So if you haven't already checked out things like my workload presentation this week, I'm trying to answer questions from Twitter, drop that over and give you guys a little bit more attention, individualized understanding of kind of what we're doing beyond just community. So with that being said, though, a lot going on in community, a lot going on tonight, a lot coming up. We got a lot of faces planning to drop by. Pretty excited about it. So we'll explain that another date, another episode. But before we get into anything tonight, let's jump into our first sponsor. Garrett, you ready to do this?
Yeah.
Let's freaking rock, dude. Boom. Have you ever wanted a deeper understanding of your mechanics? For years, to fully get objective information on biomechanics, you had to visit a biomechanics lab. This process was clunky. Markers, a cold lab, expensive lab equipment. It was a process that many either couldn't experience or didn't enjoy. Good news, though. Today, you can get objective data on your mechanics right from the palm of your hand. No more awkward, expensive lab. Just you and your phone. ProPlayAI presents to you Pitch AI. Pitch AI is a groundbreaking technology bringing lab-accurate data right to you daily. Never has understanding how to improve your mechanics been so easy. Just capture, review, and repeat. Perfect your training anytime, anywhere. Pitch AI. Check it out today at ProPlayAI.com. Appreciate ProPlayAI and their support of our channel. Boom. So going to Inside the Metrics today. Speaking of ProPlayAI, we're going to bring Dr. Mike Sonne on talk to us about the Kinetic Chain. Garrett, you like to throw a lot, seems like, in the spare time at our facility. How's your Kinetic Chain?
Very bad.
Suboptimal.
No, it's terrible. It's a helicopter. I call it the helicopter method, where you just turn and burn. And
you don't rotate very well.
You try to rotate as well.
You just don't rotate very well.
I don't, but you try to.
All right, well, moving on tonight, let's jump into it with Dr. Mike Sonne. Here is our Inside the Metrics this week, talking about the Kinetic Chain. Doctor, what's up?
What's happening, Casey? You staying warm down there?
Oh, it's beautiful. 70, and how cold is it up there?
We got minus 13 Celsius right now, and we've had 0 drunken quarterbacks on boats in our city in the past little bit. So we're not quite living the life that you are down in Tampa.
Hey, it's Champa Bay. We've been winning. I don't know if you've noticed. So, well, I want to jump into this today. I want to talk about the Kinetic Chain specifically. So, what is the Kinetic Chain? How do I need to learn more about this. What is the Kinetic Chain?
So, in the loosest, broadest definition, it is the ability for the body to transfer energy from the lower half to the ball. So it's the most efficient or effective way of getting the energy that's coming out of the ground through the legs, through the pelvis, the trunk, into the arm, and then ultimately delivered to the ball.
I know from our discussion, you've got a couple of guys in your database. Let's jump into some examples maybe. Do you have anybody that you can showcase and kind of give us an idea of what might be the differences in a kinematic sequence between two throwers to the same velocity?
Absolutely. So we've got two fantastic KineticPro athletes here, both of them throwing 97 miles an hour, and we're looking at their kinematic sequence here. Now, what I want you to consider is that when people talk about this kinematic sequence or the kinetic chain, they're looking for a specific order of operations. They're looking for pelvis, then trunk, then elbow, then shoulder internal rotation velocity. And they want those things to happen in that order. what simply looking at peaks kind of neglects to look at is the timing of that, right? There is an optimal timing. If those peaks are too far apart, chances are you've lost some of that kinetic energy that's moving through the system. If they're too close together, you haven't really been able to harness that type of energy. So we've got two, and I'm going to just slide this scroll here so you can kind of see their whole motion. We've got two guys that are throwing 97 miles an hour, but the reality is they're doing it in very different ways. We've got one guy who's a little bit taller than the other. We've also got someone who's really sinking into their lower half a little bit more there. And what I want you to pay attention to on this graph here is look at that relationship between the peak of the torso rotation and the peak of the shoulder internal rotation. So that's that solid line and then the broad dashed line that's on the screen there. So the master here, we're seeing a peak that's happening very close to each other. We're seeing a peak of that trunk there and a peak of his shoulder internal rotation in the graph there. And you can see, when he's planting his foot and his pelvis starts to open up, his arm is much more upright at that point in time. So it's not saying that anything is bad or anything is worse here, but you can see that these two guys are transferring that energy from their lower half to their throwing arm in two different ways. So one thing that I think traditional analyses are missing, and that's included in ProPlay, and this is where some of the kind of interpretation is going to have to take into effect, is we've got to look at that timing component of this as well. It's not simply just a matter of, okay, the peaks have checked off 4 in a row, we're good to go, that's a perfect kinematic sequence. We've got to start looking into, the time between those events and, the magnitudes between those events. Those are the types of things that I think the future of kinematic sequencing analysis are really going to shine a lot of light on.
It sounds like what you're saying here is that it can't just be we're going to shoot for 800 degrees per second pelvis rotation, or we're going to shoot for, this time of the trunk rotation. It sounds to be a little bit more complex than that. And it seems like we're going to need more metrics to help us support and give more of an absolute picture of how we can calculate progression for an athlete over time with biomechanics. Am I wrong there, or is there anything you would like to add to that?
Not wrong at all. And I think the most important thing to consider here is that it isn't a one-size-fits-all model, right? People move because of certain things. In that situation, in that example that we were looking at there, we were looking at arm speed and we're looking at torque. We also have to consider, what is the body capable of doing? And, one of the things you do is make sure that people go through a full physical range of motion screen beforehand. So if you're going to say, hey, you need to get your body into this position, or you need to move your body in this way, but the tissues are not actually capable of doing that, that's when the injuries start to occur. So it's very important to take into consideration, the capacity of that person, what they're capable of doing before you start saying, okay, this is what I need to see out of your kinematic sequence, and these are the absolute values. I think most importantly is seeing how values change over time. That's always going to be more important than saying, let's look at this one value.
Awesome. Sounds like some more data collection for me. Then we're going to have to go find some low skill individuals, high skill individuals, maybe get outside of the wall of KineticPro a little bit to do some data capturing.
Shouldn't you just go do some throwing then, Casey? Maybe we could get you on the mound. we gotta lower that average velocity a little bit.
Awesome. Well, as always, Mike, I appreciate it. Looking forward to the next one.
Awesome, Casey. We'll talk soon.
See you, dude.
Boom, just like that. So I think following up, number one, first off, thanks, Mike, for coming on. Unbelievable information. ProPlayAI and what they're doing with Pitch AI, just a whole other realm for us to look into and be able to look objectively. It's something that we couldn't quantify for so many years, which is throwing mechanics, right? We had to use a lab, or you had to go into look at a really high-end researcher, and really clunky. It was just kind of really weird to use. Now we can do this every day and start to look in deeper at things like the kinetic chain. And it's one of those terms, I hear this term all the time, right? The kinetic chain. Coaches use this term as even in strength and conditioning, we have this this understanding of the kinetic chain and how we pass energy through the body. But coaches use it as like this like cop word, like this cop out word, right? It's like, if energy leaks from the kinetic chain, it's not efficient. But they use that to back themselves and validate themselves and say this in the sense that it's, like if you don't do their model, if you don't do this model, what I tell you to do in this way, then you're not going to have an effective or efficient kinetic chain. And therefore, you're not going to throw hard, right? Or you're not going to perform well. And so I think, one of the unique things is hearing it from somebody like Mike, who is just so intelligent in the space, obviously, created with his team, the ProPlayAI company and Pitch AI. And we look at things like the kinetic chain, he's explaining it, and you start to kind of realize, man, wait a minute. If he's saying there's not a one size fits all model, then why is the coach down the road saying that if you don't do my model, then you're not going to be able to perform at your highest level? It just doesn't make sense logically. So I kind of laugh. It's like we have to break these norms. We have to get away from the marketing. We have to be able to think for ourselves as individuals and start asking questions. And I challenge you guys all the time. If you don't understand what we're talking about, ask us. Right? Like, if you don't trust that I just know what I'm talking about. Same thing for you. Like, don't just trust that Garrett knows what he's talking about. Garrett's a mad scientist. He knows exactly what he's talking about. But don't just trust that we know what we're talking about. Ask questions and try to learn through the process and challenge the system. Say, hey, listen, I saw things this way. Why do we do it this way? What you might find is that there's things that are maybe not as absolute as what you think they are. Now, on the flip side of that, the way to actually learn and to grow the system, to be a better space, to learn more appropriately together, sometimes really just comes down to asking great questions and forcing the environment around you to either rethink the process that they're in or to reestablish some things. So, great segment inside the metrics this week. Again, Mike, thanks so much for coming on and explaining the kinetic chain. Maybe we'll dive a little deeper into the strength and conditioning side of that in the future. Obviously, the pitching side of it is, we're measuring it, we're kind of monitoring it with our guys individually, and it's kind of our 10,000 foot overview as to what an athlete really does in terms of mechanics. So more on that as we get into the future. We'll get deeper into the metrics of ProPlayAI and other products on the inside the metrics. But for tonight, moving on to our next segment, going to our next sponsor, which is CTD. So, as we know, it is critical to further our education as coaches. To continue education, it is important to have a deep relationship with other leading coaches and leaders in the baseball industry. That's why the Connecting the Dots Coaches Conference was created. The CTD goal is to ensure meaningful one-on-one conversations with industry leaders. This conference goes beyond the presentation and connects both your further knowledge with an industry-leading network. Join CTD on December 3rd through the 5th in Knoxville, Tennessee. For more information on CTD, visit ctdbconference.com, where you can learn more about the conference, see the speaker list, and you can reserve your tickets. Great news on CTD. TJ Wharton just reported this, that CTD is now free for coaches. So awesome opportunity. I will be speaking on Saturday at noon that weekend, and I'll be presenting on workload management, building dynamic systems, even talking about AI in the future of baseball. So pretty exciting. If you guys haven't already checked it out, it's ctdbconference.com, where you can reserve your tickets for the conference, especially if you're in that Tennessee area. Stop on by, check it out. It's going to be a good one. So, all right. So next we're going to be moving to Under the Hood. Garrett, one of your favorite topics, KP bands. We're going to be talking tonight about the issues with resistance band training. And Garrett and I are going to go in deep talking about KP bands. Product comes out January at ABCA. Pretty stoked about it. Garrett will be there at ABCA for all of you to meet Garrett. Garrett, how do you feel about KP bands?
Good. It's been, 2.5-year process? Finally being able to get them out and showcasing what we can do with them. Almost
3 years, I guess. Yeah. We've been contemplating this thing for a long time, trying to figure out how to best do it. Got a process, we're patent pending at the moment, but hopefully that goes through. That's what you see behind us here on the wall. That's our patent that we're hoping gets through here shortly, but nonetheless, we are excited about this process. So let's dive into it. Going under the hood, Casey and Garrett on KP bands. All right, let's dive into it. So there are some major issues with resistance band training in baseball. This is something years ago that you and I kind of started talking about, trying to figure out a solution. How do we independently create a training protocol for an athlete, right? There's this major disconnect. I remember when I was in pro ball, we had our athletic trainers would create this really individualized shoulder care program. But then at the end of the day, they would also go, hey, when you go out to the field, just do the 5 exercises up there on the board. And you're going, well, wait a minute, like you just assessed me. You just did this massive, shoulder program that you want me to do, but then you just want me to blanket do the same exercises every day. Like those maybe not the best for me, or maybe they are the best for me. I remember a trainer actually telling me not to do a certain exercise one time. And I'm like, well, then why do we have all 5 exercises if they're not all 5 of them or all 10 of them are good for certain athletes? That just didn't make sense. It didn't sit well with me. So over the years, we were looking at ways to solve this problem and create a new protocol, and stumbled upon this process, which we now call the KP bands process, KP bands method, which is our KP band system. So let's jump into some points here. Some observations that we saw surrounding flaws that we saw in resistance band training. Some things that we saw, Garrett, this is some things that you and I kind of made note of over the years, right? We'll take them off. I'll go the first one, you go the second one here. So we have athletes that were no longer feeling challenged by a continually stagnant band program, right? So athletes were, having this 10 exercise set, they lose interest because it was stagnant. Nothing was changing. They weren't challenged by it. They got really good at those exercises, but that didn't help them get to where they want to go. So I'll let you take number 2.
Yeah, athletes were physically unprepared in many cases for the exercise type or resistance band tension.
Yeah, so I think in that one it was, we looked at some younger athletes that were trying to pull some really heavy tensions, and we were like, "Whoa, wait a minute, you're not ready for that. Let's like, well, I bought the band set and it said this was I'm like, yeah, well, you're not ready for that age range. Yeah. You're definitely not ready for this tubes tension." So a lot of guys, even our college guys, we had some older guys.
And like getting older and older and doing the same tension that like a 12-year-old and a pro guy should be using is totally 2 different things. Is one of the main things we saw.
So moving on to number 3, in some cases, athletes would have no program in front of them and refer to, which led them to create their own exercise that felt good, which we see this if you go out to any showcase, any travel ball tournament, you're going to see some kid with bands attached to the fence and he's just going, okay, I feel pretty good. I'm ready to go now. Let's do it. And you're like, well, what exercise was that you just, I don't know, just felt good. And you're like, well, what about the program that came with the actual, I lost a couple. It broke my bat bag, or I left it at my house, or whatever. And so they just had no concept of what they were actually trying to do. They were just using this very expensive product in some cases to just wing around and feel good about their pregame routine before they do it. So Garrett, take number 4.
Yeah, athletes that did look to execute advanced programming would often feel fatigue from the bands because there's no individualization from the bands program that they're actually doing.
Yeah, so when we look at really the idea of fatiguing, like an athlete who just pitched, and we'll get into this a little bit, but an athlete who just pitched the day before, like, we don't want to provide the same band program 3 days straight for that athlete. That doesn't make any logical sense. Like, your musculature is not ready to handle that. So, we're fatiguing athletes in some cases by them overdoing bands, a couple days after they're throwing, or in some cases, guys just didn't do enough to actually get any solid change or any actual work in. So, when they did go to throw, or when they did go do these things, like that strength that they expected to have because they quote unquote did bands just wasn't there. So you have this kind of both sides of the spectrum. It's too hot, too cold, and just right. And we're trying to create a program that's just right. And we have to do that objectively. So those are kind of the main issues that we saw when we first started diving into this, and we wanted to address through a process. So this is a 6-week case study that we did on one of our athletes, and it was the coolest case study. Like, I mean, we were stoked about this one, and we've got others that are similar. We did a return to throw with the guy, Tommy John, every single day for 200.
He got to I think 200, and then he finally missed one.
Yeah, 200 something days. I mean, straight, and it was unbelievable. So that study alone, I mean, the volume of that study is amazing. So we're going to continue to do more. We are still continuing to do more. We've got now beta units with groups like University of Michigan, and we got a couple other groups coming out. I won't mention names. So we're sending them around the country to people and trying to get some other individuals into this testing. We've got Inspiration Academy, IA down in Bradenton. I will mention them. They've got 10 units and working through it. So we got a lot of data coming in. Really excited to start to kind of process this data and see where guys are at. But jumping into our case study here, you want to explain the case study a little bit and kind of what we saw? We came up with this idea to look at a 4-day recovery cycle.
Yeah.
And we took one of our starters who was starting at the time for a junior college down the road, and he was relieving on the weekends. So we didn't really know that was going to happen, but we started the season with him. And you want to kind of explain the setup of how we went through and actually collected this data over that 6-week period?
Yeah, so guy was starting on Mondays, and so we would have him test every day for, I think we got 6 weeks. This was COVID year, so we got the whole season basically. So he would come in every single day, just out of bed, waking up, coming straight into our facility. Before he did anything throughout the day, we'd come in and test. So we can see, if you look at the graph, you see week 1 through 4, he's about like 5'8", like a 6'3" to like a 7'8". And then dip down a little, and then 48 hours later is when we saw the biggest dip in his score. So these are scores
6'3" to 6'8". 6'3" to 6'8". Yeah, you're good. Yeah, 6'3" to 6'8". That's where he started at. Yeah.
Yeah. So he started there, and then in those first 4 weeks, he was relieving on Saturdays as well.
Yep.
So you see those first 4 weeks, his velo started dropping, command, everything like that. He was complaining about just overall, hey man, I didn't feel like my starts were getting better.
It's this term dead arm. And there's a lot of coaches that will say, especially early in season, like, hey, our guys, we either got to get them through dead arm, or we've got to be able to, start to manage dead arm, so to speak. And so his complaint was he came in and said, man, I just feel like I got a dead arm right now. Like my velocity is just dropping, and I just feel like I'm not producing the output right. And so that's the baseball term for this is dead arm is what people are talking about now. Is that, everybody's universal term for dead arm? I don't know, but that's what what he came in and said. So,
yeah. So we looked at his stuff. We knew he was relieving on Saturdays. So from a throwing standpoint, what did you guys do with him from a throwing standpoint on Saturdays?
Yeah, so the big thing is I talked to his coach and I said, hey, listen, and great thing that the coach was open and likes us enough, who's willing to listen, which is amazing. So I said, hey, I got some data. It's interesting. We see this weird recovery cycle. He's complaining of kind of this like fatigue, this dead arm period. What we're seeing is he goes into a start, like we said, be somewhere between like 6'3" and 6'8". He tends to go down over the next 48 hours. 48 hours being his worst. Starts to come out of it 72 hours. But let's do this. What if we just didn't have him relieve on Saturday? Right? He's starting on Monday. He's relieving on Saturday. Let's just not have him relieve on Saturday, and let's just watch and see what happens the next Monday as it comes around again. Let's just see where his numbers go in terms of our TSO score, and we'll look at that. We'll explain that as readiness. So let's say his readiness on that following Monday. Let's see what it looks like and see if some numbers don't start to come back. So sure enough, he comes in the following Monday.
Yep.
And this was the big day for us.
That's week 5.
That was week 5.
Week 5.
So it's the orange line that you see up there on the graph. And so week 5, he comes in first. This was an exciting day for us because we knew, like, okay, if we're going to see a difference here, if we're really monitoring, he can't be as fatigued as he was the previous weeks, right? So he comes in that Monday, tests, and he goes up. It's like a 7.6, I want to say. Somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And we were like, holy cow, this is amazing. Like something definitely different is like going on here, right? Recovery cycle, which was interesting the next couple of days, was the exact same.
Yeah.
So he goes 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, starts to come out of it again. And then same thing, we tell his coach, hey, do not relieve him on Saturday. Like take the bullpen, bring down the intensity, bring down the volume a little bit, light bullpen through the week. Get him ready for the following Monday. Comes back again and exceeds week 5 with week 6. Now he's up to like a 7.7 or 7.8. And we're like, holy cow, we've got something, right? And so we started talking about this. And if you guys look at the graph below there, you'll see the workloads through 3 of those weeks. He has some pretty big one-day workloads. That's that Monday. And so what you see is that chart, that green line, is that readiness score, the TISO score, where it goes down and comes up, and you see it kind of really start to dip down and then bounce back up again out of that. And we saw that week over week over week with him. And we see that with other athletes too. We've tracked this. We've seen this with other athletes. So when we start to talk about fatigue, right? And this is what we're going back to our bands now and the discussion of our bands. Number one, we're able to start to monitor this. Do we have absolutes in terms of like what you should do if we see this on this program? Not really. Good conversation, good recommendation. Like I talked about with that coach, hey, you're starting him on Monday, relieving him on Saturday. Kind of common sense. Like, hey, let's pull back one if he's struggling a little bit. Let's pull back on that. Maybe try to switch up the program a little bit. Was it perfect? If we did that for everybody, would that provide results? No, not really. Maybe not. But this is where we're starting to combine this with our throwing workload metrics and starting to see bigger picture, kind of what's going on. But what's really exciting for us when we talk about this is we start to say from our system, right? Our system auto-regulates your band training. So here's what we don't want to happen. And this is where you and I have discussed this, right? So imagine this athlete's struggling through week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And on top of that, you're blasting him after every single day with this really tough band program, right? It's the same on his start day as it is on the 24-hour mark or the 48-hour mark where he's at his lowest readiness. He's not going to go through this cycle. If you're blasting his shoulders, he's not going to go through this cycle as effectively. What you need is a band program that can dynamically move, reduce the load, reduce the volume and intensity on that 48-hour mark or on that 24-hour mark as his readiness score goes down, and then up it as he goes up. So this is what we've created through our app and through the band program as we use that TISO score. And so I'll go on here to our training. We've created a dynamic training model for resistance band training. So coming out in January as well is our Connect app, which will house this band program. The software is going to be free for the bands. You just have to buy the hardware, buy that TISO unit, buy our bands. But this is what I love about this is I watch our guys, I talk to our guys about this and they're shocked. Hey, I created, so let's say I test today and I'm at a 5.5 and well, not bad, just feeling a little sore from the workout yesterday or whatever that is. Hey, no problem. As your score goes up, that training program that we've created, that dynamic model that you see here in the app, that's going to get harder as you start to lower that score again. Maybe you throw a bullpen, maybe you work out and your upper body's pretty taxed from that workout, especially in the off season. That program is going to become easier. And so we changed the set rep scheme, tempo, exercise selection. What I love about the exercise selection is that you chose exercises. We created exercises. We created a filtering system based upon your age range, based upon your body type, based upon how you're moving, all that stuff. We created a filtering system that allows us to look in and create an exercise protocol that actually scales, right? So if I'm at the peak strength of a 18 plus athlete, or 25 plus athlete, my movement quality is probably gonna be a lot bigger. My awareness, my body's gonna be a lot better, right? So we're gonna give you harder exercises that are a little bit more challenging in terms of movement quality. If you're a youth athlete or if you're somebody who is, I say youth, but this is our band program right now is designed for that 13-year-old age range. Let's say 13 to 16. Maybe not gone through puberty yet, maybe not so much body awareness. We're gonna limit or lower that movement quality requirements for some of these exercises. We're going to give you a lot more in terms of the focus around tensions and focus around set rep scheme and tension, like I said. So when we look at this, we have to start to evaluate and look deeper. And I think that's one thing I'm really excited about with this band protocol and this program in general is that we went much deeper, much deeper than this was just a rabbit hole for us where we started really trying to evaluate how do we do this better. And so we're not doing this segment tonight to sell our bands. I mean, it's great to bring awareness to our bands, but we want to talk about really what makes them different and some of the flaws that we see with resistance band training, because it is such a great space for our athletes if they do it appropriately, but it can be such a negative space if an athlete either doesn't do it or does it too much, and or just doesn't do it at all or doesn't have any feel for it. So I mean, Garrett, we've been doing this for 3 years. I mean, and our feedback, like, what have you heard from some of the guys in terms of feedback on this thing and in-house? I know what I've heard, but like, give me what you've heard.
Yeah, a lot of them love the ability to adjust, where like they come in and they're super fatigued, and it's like, oh, I don't have 4 sets, or I don't have 1 set, or I don't have 200 some reps. It's like a very simple, where it's like, okay, 2 sets of 15, got it with this tempo, good. And if they're feeling good, they know, okay, this is going to be a harder band program, but it's also going to be like, oh, I'm ready to do that, so we can actually get something out of the bands programs. That majority of the time that it's just a band program. You do the bands because that's what you've been doing for 10 years, and it adjusts, and that's what they really like about it.
Yeah, it's like too hot, too cold, just right. And all of our guys continue to tell us like, hey, it's just right. Like I feel a good burn in some days. I feel challenged just enough on most of my days. Like, but it's not so much that's killing me, and it's not doing anything at all. And in some cases where it's like, hey, I some band programs or some routines that you do, you're like, I just don't feel like I'm getting much out of it. These guys all feel challenged by it, but they're not reporting that they're getting in that fatigue space, and that's our goal. We wanted to auto-regulate, right? I mean, that was the goal. So we feel like we're hitting on it, and really excited to bring this out to the public. So with that being said, that is our Under the Hood tonight. Garrett crushed it. I mean, outstanding. I'm not talking about our segment. I'm talking about the bands in general. So Garrett's been a huge piece to that, and put a lot of time and effort in, above and beyond just the daily training floor stuff that we do. And that's why you're the mad scientist, dude. That's where it came from. So, but as this continues to get out, look for that this December. We're going to be making some announcements, and in January we'll go full release. Like I said, we've got this program out there to other groups. It will now include, coming in January, a prep program, and it will also now include what you just saw us talk about, which is our strength program. Some updates to the prep program coming in 2022, but full release prep program and strength program, all strength program being dynamic through moving forward into the future. I'm pretty excited about that as we get guys into it. So interested in that, hit us up, support@KineticProBaseball.com if you want more information on that. Otherwise, look us up on social media and check us out at ABCA if you'll be there, or tuning in virtually. Check us out. We'll see us presenting a lot on that, and you'll hear a lot more on that on this channel and other spaces. So moving on tonight to our AMA. Got a couple questions from some guys, some good questions this week. Garrett, you want to start it off with a question that you had?
Yeah, so I got a question from Joe Coders off of Instagram. He's a strength coach at Baseball Performance Center up in New Jersey. And he asks, gist of the question is, when do you know, what metrics do you guys use to know if an athlete is strong enough in the weight room? And that's really like an age-old question of having a strength program with a team sport athlete, is when is an athlete strong enough? So we use VBT for everything from that standpoint to see overall force production. We have an equation that we put velocity, distance, load into to see where that athlete is at. And then based off of that, we see how, before even we get to VBT, we got to see where they progress through a progression. We have them in the weight room to actually deadlift, and we've talked about deadlifting and squatting and all that stuff in earlier episodes. So check those out if you want to go know more about those. But on that progression, when we think about being strong enough, it's especially in baseball, because the strength room is so far away from what we're doing in the pitching side, that it's really hard to know when an athlete is strong enough. So Joe and I talked about how young guys, especially, where it's like, if I have a freshman in high school, for 3 years, basically just try to get as strong as possible, because overall or absolute strength is what is going to take the longest amount of time to develop. But once you have it, it really never goes away if you always just sprinkle in that high load every once in a while throughout their training cycle, especially with like pro guys as well. We know in off season's 4 months, 2 of those months are going to be high velocity throwing. So we're really not going to push the athlete that hard in those 2 months. And then we have basically 2 months to push them hard for that absolute strength. and just being able to take that and understand, yes, being absolutely strong is best, but when it comes down to it, it's the skill aspect of pitching that's ultimately going to really dictate everything from an on-field standpoint.
So talk a little bit about, like, you have your absolute strength, and we have a base of absolute strength, and you push guys through another cycle, which is kind of our speed cycle, where we're pushing guys through with BBT, kind of measuring out, getting closer to season. Kind of talk about, like, when you expect, like, an ideal progression. Kind of, you talked about, like, younger guys, like, having them in this absolute strength model, trying to just build that absolute strength over time. Like, talk about, and I think this goes back to the validity and the need for training, like the time of year for training, right? If I'm 13 years old to 16 years old, and all I've done over those 3 years is just work on getting really, really strong in the weight room, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe then we can start pushing. Like, what do you usually, like, look to our guys? Like, when do you make that assertion that, hey, this would be the ideal time for me to start pushing, like, different cycles of your training? And maybe going to more higher end, higher quality strength training for those guys.
Yeah, so it goes off a throwing schedule. Younger guy taking the fall off. Obviously, you're not throwing as much. Really going to try to push that absolute strength. Then a little bit older, so let's say senior year, hasn't been recruited or hasn't been committed yet. Okay, even though he might not be as strong or as we would like, we need him to be at his top level performance so he can get recruited. And he can get committed, because ultimately our job is to get him to college, and then hopefully ultimately to the pros, where it's like, okay, even though we know he's not strong enough, we can then push more velocity and speed training to get his body moving as fast as it possibly can be. So then when he goes out on the field, he can have some really good numbers, get committed. Once he's committed, then it's okay. Now we can go back to absolute strength, where now we can try to build that up, because now we know he's set and his path to college is already set. Now we can start pushing that absolute strength. College guys, always trying to sprinkle in that every summer, every winter, just trying to sprinkle in those things, letting them still throw, because they're probably going to be throwing more high intensity during the summer to the winter. So being able to sprinkle in little amounts of absolute strength. And then pro guys are going to be the same thing, just knowing that we have those first 2 months in the off season to really push anything. And if they're building back up from doing nothing, because the pro guys probably didn't do anything for 2 weeks because long season, just being able to, okay, we're going to, month 1 is going to be a on-ramp phase from a lifting standpoint, and then month 2, push it really hard, and then by month 3, month 4, let them more velocity-based stuff, building capacity of their body, because they're throwing more high intensity, and we don't want to be putting too much stress on those guys right before that season.
Yep.
From that standpoint.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, hopefully that answers in that case then the question. Appreciate you guys reaching out. Like I said, if you guys have questions moving forward into the future here, support at KineticProBaseball.com is a place to send it, or you can reach out to us over social medias. In this case, guy reached out to Garrett via his social media. Good follow, like Garrett's account. So good job. Might have had some influence on some of the pictures, but that's all right. Well, that's good. But no, this week from another question that we have here, and again, great questions coming in from you guys. So just keep them up. We appreciate it. It's super helpful for us to number one, know where you guys are at and to learn more about kind of what you want to learn about. But two, these questions are more universal for a lot of the guys that are tuning in. So appreciate you guys tuning in and asking these questions. This one comes from one of our remote clients, Josh. Josh asks, for managing workload as a bullpen arm in season, what should pregame throwing look like? And this is a great question that comes up a lot. So moving into question 2 here and explaining kind of, what should a reliever do in season for their workload routine, basically for their routine daily, in order to put themselves in a good spot for workload. And so I explain it like this. We won't talk about the off season. We basically have to build up our fitness level for off season, right? And so for a reliever, it's a little different. Oftentimes with our relief models, we'll bring in a lot more days of throwing a lot quicker in the off season. So earlier we'll move to a 5 or 6 day program. Earlier we'll move to a 6 to 7 day program. And then our goal is to build our light days up to like an 8 or 10 daily workload values. Now this is predicated upon, obviously, Josh in this case is a low slot guy. So he's going to have a little bit higher workload for that reason. He throws a little bit more throughout the season. We've already established that. But other guys who are super efficient, maybe not throwing with quite as much stress over day, do their arm path and different movement types and different things that they do. Your chronic workload, your fitness level might be lower in requirement in season. In this case, for certain athletes, we're going to have that higher fitness base. So we're going to build that in the off season, get where we need to be before spring training or before high school season, before college. But our goal is to then move our 1 day workload somewhere between like an 8 and 10 for those guys that have lower loads that are just more efficient. Like I said, they might even go down to like a 6 1 day workload in that case. But that's our base. So our routine every day is going to be basically the exact same throwing daily in terms of load. We want a 6 to 10 or an 8 to 10. And then from there, if a coach calls upon you to throw, let's say you go to a 20 today, because we know that's about where most relievers are at. Jump from like they'll do about 10 workload units in a game, unless you throw like 3 pitches and you're super efficient and you get out of an inning. But we basically we create that foundation of chronic now, that fitness level. So when you do get that one additional 10 workload added to your days, it doesn't really change so much. You're still within your AC ratio. The following days, even if you go back out and pitch again, you've got so much load built up. Those additional days of load don't really, have such a big impact overall. So that 10 provides us a good stable base, and then we're able to build up off of that day over day. So that's how I recommend relievers go about it. Basically, what I'm saying here for season is that every day the reliever goes out, plays catch up to a 10 1-day workload, then goes into a game if they get called upon. But no matter what, even if you get called upon that day, the next day you go back out, you throw an 8 to 10 again. You throw an 8 to 10 again the next day. You throw an 8 to 10 again the next day. Oh, look, I got called upon again. No big deal. Then back to the following day, 8 to 10. We're basically just adding those additional throwing volumes or throwing loads to what we've already created as our base from that 8 to 10 on a daily basis. So Josh, hopefully that answers the question. Basically what I recommend in season for our relievers is just to maintain that routine of an 8 to 10. Now what you do in that routine, for me, doesn't really matter that much. Just don't want you throwing 100% all out intensity every day, obviously, but right out of the gate, we want to build up to that. We want to be able to handle a good progression, a good routine, taking into account things like fatigue units. How do I manage, the amount of time between my segments? So I throw plyo care balls, take a little bit of time off, and then go to my long toss, not just going straight from plyos to long toss to bullpen. That can happen a lot for guys and elevates, their fatigue units, which can be an issue. So different ways of looking at this, different ways of structuring this, basically at the end of the day, like I said, best answer, keep that base in your warm-up routine, 8 to 10, mix your plyos or mix your specific work. But reality is maintain your routine from that 8 to 10. So Josh, hopefully that answers that question for you. Appreciate that question. And with that being said, we're going to move on tonight to the wrap. So let's kick it over to the wrap. Tonight for the wrap, number one, like I said, I want to wrap things up tonight by talking about our YouTube channel. So all of you guys that have hopped on, subscribed, appreciate it so much. Continue to please hop on and subscribe to the channel. The more that we get in terms of our traffic and the more people that are engaging, the more that we're able to get this message out to the public and to those that really need it. Our hope is to find, doing this, our goal is to find kids that are out there who need this information, who want to learn more about this stuff, maybe not getting it somewhere else, and hopefully they hear it through us. So all of you guys, engaging and being a part of this process with us, our community, that's why we call it KP Community. We want you guys to know we're super appreciative, super thankful. Any of you guys who are tuning in, who are following along, not yet subscribed, please subscribe so we can continue to move on and push out into the future. Those of you that are interested in coming down to Tampa to train with us this off-season, this winter, going to be packed this winter. We got a lot of guys coming in. We got a lot of cool stuff happening. We'll announce some of the groups that are coming in to be a part of what we're doing in future episodes. But if you guys are interested in coming down, reach out, support@KineticProBaseball.com on email. Easiest way to get in touch with us. Also, you can Google us. Feel free to call, get an initial consultation set up. You can go on our website and set up your first assessment. Go to KineticProBaseball.com. Go to the scheduling tab or go to the baseball tab. and you guys will see a place to start scheduling. So excited to get things rocking. We already got our guys in, got our pro guys out at the field for the first time this past week, getting their catch play in around the A3 group. So super thankful to be out there. 75 degrees in Florida, not a better place to be. But Garrett, any closing statements tonight for the community? As always. Anyways, appreciate it, guys. That's episode 8, and we'll see you guys next week. Later.